Marina stood in the hospital corridor, discharge papers folded in her left hand, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. The nurse at the station had been kind. Too kind, the way people are when they're relieved you're not their problem anymore. Minor concussion protocol. Observation complete. She'd signed her name 3 times, watched the nurse slide the carbon copies into a manila folder, and felt nothing. The rental car had clipped a median on I-90 outside Cleveland 3 days ago. She remembered the jolt, the sound of metal scraping asphalt, the deployed airbag pressing her back into the seat like a firm hand. What she didn't remember was anyone asking if she was okay. She pushed through the double doors into the main lobby, where a television mounted in the corner played the local evening news. A woman in a coral blazer gestured at footage of a highway pileup. Twisted metal, emergency lights, a silver sedan half obscured by smoke. Marina's steps slowed. That was her car. Or one that looked exactly like it. The Chiron scrolled past. Pharmaceutical executive survives multi-vehicle collision. Company releases statement. She hadn't released anything. She'd been asleep in a hospital bed, waking every 4 hours for neurological checks, alone. The nurse glanced at the screen, then at Marina, and her face did something complicated. Marina walked faster. The drive home to New Jersey took 2 hours. She'd refused the follow-up Uber her assistant had offered to schedule, rented another car from the airport lot, and drove herself because that's what she did. She always drove herself. The suburbs unfolded in their usual geometry, manicured lawns, basketball hoops tilted in driveways, porch lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled. Her house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, the blue mailbox she'd painted with Chloe when she was 7 still listing slightly to the left. She pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and sat for a moment in the silence. Through the front window, she could see the glow of the television in the den. She gathered her purse, the discharge papers, the plastic hospital bag with her belongings. Her keys felt heavier than they should. She opened the front door quietly, muscle memory from years of arriving home late, trying not to wake anyone, and stepped into the foyer. The smell of microwave popcorn, the television volume low but audible. She set her purse on the console table, heard the murmur of voices from the den, and started toward the sound. Then she heard Ethan's voice, clear and unbothered. Finally, we're free of her. Marina stopped. The keys slipped from her hand, clattered against the tile. In the den, Chloe laughed. Not cruelly, just casually, the way you laugh at a meme. I know, right? The television was paused on the same news segment Marina had seen in the hospital, her car frozen mid-frame in a plume of smoke. Neither of them was crying. Neither of them looked afraid. Ethan sat, forward on the couch, elbows on his knees, and Chloe scrolled through her phone, half smiling. Relief. That's what Marina saw on their faces. Pure, uncomplicated relief. She bent slowly, picked up her keys. The sound made both of them turn. Ethan's face drained of color in an instant, his mouth opening and closing like he'd forgotten how to form words. Chloe's phone slipped from her hand onto the couch cushion. Mom! Her voice cracked. We thought... Marina looked at them both. These two people she'd grown inside her body, and felt a strange, distant calm. She didn't ask what they thought. She already knew. She turned and walked upstairs to the guest room she'd been sleeping in since the separation 6 months ago, closed the door behind her, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her purse lay beside her. She unzipped it, pulled out the envelope she'd been carrying since the morning of the accident. The settlement letter. $4.7 million from the whistleblower case she'd spent 2 years building, the one that had cost her 18-hour days and cold dinners and every recital she'd missed. She unfolded it, read the number again, and felt the same hollow ache she'd felt when the nurse had asked if she wanted to call anyone. She hadn't known who to call. She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and lay down on top of the covers. Downstairs, she could hear the low murmur of Ethan and Chloe whispering, frantic and guilty. She closed her eyes. She'd deal with it tomorrow. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the guest room blinds. Marina woke before her alarm, dressed in the same jeans and sweater she'd worn home from the hospital, and went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like nothing. No coffee brewing, no toast burning, just the faint chemical scent of the dishwasher's rinse cycle. Ethan sat at the table, staring at his phone. Chloe stood by the counter, arms crossed, looking everywhere but at Marina. Neither of them had gone to school yet. Marina filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and turned the burner on. Do you need lunch money? Her voice came out steady, almost pleasant. Ethan shook his head without looking up. Chloe said no, barely audible. Marina opened the cabinet, pulled down her favorite mug, the one she'd bought herself on a work trip to Portland, the one Greg had always said was too big, and dropped a tea bag inside. The kettle began to hiss. She remembered the night Greg had sat them down in the same kitchen 6 months ago and told them the separation was mutual. He'd used the word mutual 3 times, as if repetition made it true. Then later, when she was upstairs packing a bag for the guest room, she'd heard him through the vent. Your mom chose her job over us. As if love were a binary choice. As if she hadn't chosen them every single day in 1,000 invisible ways. She poured the water, watched the tea steep, and took her mug to the table. Ethan glanced at her, then away. Chloe shifted her weight, uncrossed her arms, crossed them again. Marina sipped her tea. It was too hot, burned her tongue, but she didn't flinch. You should get to school, she said. They moved like startled deer, grabbing backpacks, mumbling goodbyes that didn't reach her. The front door closed. The house settled into silence. Marina sat alone at the table, holding her mug, and felt the weight of the past 2 years pressing against her sternum. She'd exposed fraudulent clinical trial data, risked her career, her reputation, her marriage. She'd done it because people's lives depended on it, and her own children had celebrated the idea of her death. At work, her boss knocked on her office door at 10:30, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Congratulations, he said, closing the door behind him. Hell of a settlement. Marina nodded, managed a smile. He didn't ask about the accident, didn't ask how she was feeling. He clapped her on the shoulder, told her to take the rest of the week if she needed it, and left. She opened her laptop, stared at the spreadsheet she'd been working on, and couldn't remember what any of the numbers meant. She minimized the window, opened her phone instead. Greg had posted a photo on social media yesterday, the day she was supposedly dead. Ethan and Chloe at a Mets game, all 3 of them grinning under the stadium lights. The caption read, "Making memories with my crew." 43 likes, 8 comments. Nobody had called the hospital. She set her phone face down on her desk, opened a browser tab, typed parental estrangement into the search bar. The results flooded the screen, articles, forums, studies, advice columns. She skimmed the first few headlines, then closed the tab. She wasn't interested in recovery strategies or reconciliation workshops or therapeutic frameworks for rebuilding trust. She was interested in the truth. Her children had looked at the possibility of her death and felt relief, and she'd spent years bending herself into shapes small enough to fit inside their disappointment. She closed her laptop, locked her office, and walked to the parking garage. Inside her car, she turned on the engine, cranked the heat, and let herself cry for exactly 1 minute. She timed it on her phone. When the minute was up, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, flipped down the visor, reapplied concealer under her eyes. She looked tired. She looked 46. She looked like someone who'd survived a car accident and come home to find out no one had missed her. She flipped the visor back up, put the car in reverse, and drove back to the office. That evening, she ordered Thai food, pad see ew with extra vegetables, nobody's favorite but hers, and ate it in the guest room with the door closed. She opened the settlement letter again, read the number, and let herself imagine a life where she didn't have to apologize for still being alive. Saturday morning, she knocked on Ethan's door at 9. Get dressed. We're going to brunch. Through the door, I have plans. She knocked on Chloe's door. Not hungry. Marina stood in the hallway, car keys already in her hand, and said to both closed doors, I'll be in the car, 5 minutes. She didn't wait for a response. She went downstairs, got in the car, and started the engine. 4 minutes later, both of them slid into the back seat, silent and sullen, seatbelts clicking into place. Marina pulled out of the driveway. Nobody spoke. The diner was the one they used to go to when the kids were small, when Saturday mornings meant pancakes and cartoons, and Greg reading the sports section while she quizzed Ethan on spelling words. The booth vinyl was still cracked in the same places. Marina slid in, Ethan and Chloe across from her, and opened the laminate menu she'd memorized a decade ago. She ordered pancakes she knew she wouldn't finish. The kids ordered, eyes down, voices small. The waitress left. Marina folded her hands on the table and waited. Chloe picked at her napkin. Ethan stared out the window. When the food arrived, Marina cut her pancakes into neat squares and ate 3 bites. Chloe pushed scrambled eggs around her plate. Ethan drank his orange juice in one long gulp. Halfway through, Chloe set down her fork. We didn't mean it like that. Marina looked at her, this 15-year-old with her father's eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin. How did you mean it? Silence. Ethan shifted in his seat. Chloe's eyes filled. Dad said you were never around. That you chose that job? Marina placed her fork down carefully, folded her napkin, and felt something settle inside her chest. Your dad's right. I worked a lot. I also paid for the house, your school, his lawyer. She kept her voice even, not bitter, just factual. Chloe flinched. Ethan stared at his plate. We thought you were dead, Chloe whispered, and we were relieved. She choked on the word, covered her mouth with her hand. Marina watched her daughter cry and felt the choice crystallizing in front of her like frost on glass. She could rebuild this with guilt, with apologies, with the emotional labor she'd been performing for years. Or she could rebuild herself first. She signaled the waitress, asked for the check, paid in cash, stood up. Let's go home. In the kitchen, Marina pulled the settlement letter from her purse and set it on the counter where both kids could see. She didn't explain, didn't wait for questions. She walked upstairs to the guest room, pulled the suitcase she'd packed that morning from under the bed, and carried it down to the car. Ethan and Chloe stood in the kitchen, staring at the letter, at the number, at each other. Marina opened the front door, paused, looked back at them. You'll be fine, she said. Then she got in her car, pulled out her phone, and texted Greg. The kids are home. I'll be in touch about custody arrangements. Don't call me. She drove to a boutique hotel 20 minutes away, checked in, under her own name, and requested a room with a desk and a view. When the clerk asked how long she'd be staying, Marina said, I'm not sure yet. She took the key card, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, and unlocked the door to a room that belonged only to her. 1 week later, Marina signed a lease on a loft in Montclair. Exposed brick, huge windows that let in light she'd forgotten existed. Walking distance to cafes she used to pass while on conference calls, always promising herself she'd stop in someday. Someday had arrived. The space was twice as expensive as it should have been and half the size of the house, and she loved it immediately. She hired movers for the furniture she'd had in storage, pieces from her first apartment, things Greg had called too modern when they'd merged their lives, a gray linen couch, a dining table made of reclaimed wood, a bed frame she assembled herself with an Allen wrench, and a YouTube video, swearing only twice. She furnished the place slowly, deliberately. No rush. No one to consult. She bought a coffee table because she liked the way the light hit the glass. She hung nothing on the walls for the first 3 days, just sat on the couch and stared at the emptiness, the potential. On the 4th day, she bought a single piece of art from a gallery 2 blocks away, an abstract painting in blues and grays that reminded her of the ocean, though she couldn't say why. The woman who owned the gallery asked if it was a gift. Marina said, for myself, and the woman smiled like she understood everything. Her phone buzzed constantly that first week. Texts from Greg, increasingly angry. Voicemails from Ethan she didn't listen to right away. She let them accumulate, little digital weights she could address when she was ready. On Thursday, she finally pressed play on Ethan's message, heard his voice crack halfway through. Mom, Dad's pissed. He says you abandoned us. Can you just come back? She deleted it, then immediately felt guilty for feeling nothing. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Finally, I didn't abandon you. I stopped accepting being erased. Let's talk Friday. 7 p.m., my new place. Address below. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. That afternoon, she met with a family therapist, not for them, for herself. The woman's office smelled like lavender and old books, the kind of place that was trying very hard to feel safe. Marina sat in a leather chair that squeaked when she shifted and answered questions she'd never let herself ask. What did she want? Not what did they need, not how could she fix this, but what did she want? She opened her mouth and nothing came out for 10 full seconds. Then, I want to stop apologizing for surviving. The therapist wrote something down, nodded. That's a good place to start. Marina opened a separate bank account that evening, transferred half the settlement, $2.3 million, and set up education trusts for both kids. Skitwin, ooh. Amounts, locked until they turned 18, no strings attached. She wasn't weaponizing money. She was removing it from the equation. Let Greg accuse her of whatever he wanted. Her kids would have their futures secured, and they'd know she'd done it without asking for gratitude. She printed the trust documents, slid them into a folder, and put the folder in her desk drawer. They'd get copies when the time was right. Not as leverage. As fact. Friday at 7, her doorbell buzzed. Marina pressed the intercom, heard Ethan's voice, unlocked the building entrance. She left her apartment door ajar and stood by the window, watching the street below. Greg's car idled at the curb. He didn't get out, didn't come up. Just waited until both kids were inside the building, then pulled away. Marina heard their footsteps on the stairs, Ethan taking them 2 at a time, Chloe slower, hesitant. They appeared in the doorway like strangers, scanning the space, taking in the unfamiliar furniture, the light, the version of their mother who lived here. Marina gestured toward the couch. Water? Tea? Chloe shook her head. Ethan said, "Water's fine." She poured 2 glasses, brought them over, sat in the chair across from the couch. They perched on the edge of the cushions, not relaxing, not settling. Chloe spoke first, her voice small. "We've been talking. We were awful." Marina sipped her own water, set the glass on the coffee table. "Yes, you were, and I let you be." Ethan's eyebrows drew together. "What does that mean?" Marina leaned back, let herself take up space in her own chair, in her own home. "It means I taught you that I was expendable, that my time, my work, my presence didn't matter, and you believed me." Chloe's face crumpled. "That's not—" Marina held up a hand, not unkindly. "I'm not blaming you. I'm stating a fact. Your father told you I chose my job. I worked late, missed things, and I never explained why because I didn't think I should have to. I was wrong." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Dad said you'd use the money against him." Marina almost laughed. "I don't need to. The settlement isn't revenge. It's proof I built something when no one believed me." She paused, watched them process. "Do you even know what the case was about?" They looked at each other. Chloe said, "Something with your company?" Marina shook her head. "I exposed a pharmaceutical trial that falsified data on a cardiac drug. People were taking medication that didn't work, that actually made them sicker. I documented everything, emails, test results, internal memos. I reported it knowing I'd lose colleagues, credibility, maybe my job. It took 2 years. I lost my marriage. I missed your concerts, your games, your lives." Her voice stayed steady. "I did it anyway because people were dying, and I'd do it again." The room went quiet except for the hum of traffic outside. Chloe wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "We didn't know." Marina met her gaze. "You didn't ask." It landed like a stone in still water. Ethan swallowed hard, looked down at his hands. Marina stood, walked to the window, gave them space to sit with it. She didn't need their apologies. She needed them to understand that she was a person beyond their perceptions, beyond their father's narrative, beyond the myth of the absent mother who cared more about spreadsheets than soccer practice. She turned back to face them. "I love you both. I also love myself now. And if you want to be part of my life, you'll have to meet me here." She gestured around the loft, but she meant something bigger, this space she'd carved out, this version of herself she was rebuilding. "My door's open, but I won't chase you anymore." Chloe stood, crossed the room, and hugged her. Marina felt her daughter's shoulders shake, held her without saying it was okay because it wasn't. Not yet. Ethan stayed on the couch, staring at the floor, working something out inside himself. Marina let him. Eventually he stood too, nodded once, and they left together without saying goodbye. 3 months passed in a strange, quiet rhythm. Ethan texted occasionally, memes mostly, nothing that required a real response. Marina sent back the laughing emoji, kept it light. Chloe visited twice, asked if they could walk the neighborhood, and Marina said yes. They talked about school, about Chloe's English teacher who assigned too much Faulkner, about whether she should try out for the spring musical. They didn't talk about the crash or the settlement or the night in the den. Marina didn't force it. Healing, she was learning, didn't follow a schedule. She started consulting part-time, ethics advisory for pharmaceutical companies, navigating murky regulatory waters. She kept her calendar to 30 hours a week, no exceptions. She joined a book club at the cafe 2 blocks away, showed up the first Thursday not knowing anyone, and left with a recommendation for a novel she'd never have picked herself. She learned to make pasta from scratch, failed 3 times before the dough stopped fighting her, and ate imperfect fettuccine alone at her table, pleased. She stopped checking Greg's social media, stopped wondering what he was telling people, stopped performing the version of herself that might earn back approval. One Sunday in early spring, Chloe texted, "Can I come over?" Marina replied, "Of course." An hour later, Chloe showed up with her backpack, laptop, a tangle of phone chargers. "I have a ton of homework," she said, not quite meeting Marina's eyes. "Can I just hang out here?" Marina stepped aside, let her in. Chloe dropped her bag by the couch, curled up in the corner with her laptop, and didn't say anything else. Marina made tea, brought Chloe a cup, then settled at the dining table with her own work. The silence stretched, comfortable and strange. When Marina looked up an hour later, Chloe was asleep, head tilted against a cushion, laptop still open. Marina closed it gently, draped a blanket over her daughter, and went back to her work. It was enough. The following weekend, Ethan showed up unannounced. Marina was making coffee when the buzzer sounded. She pressed the intercom. "Yeah?" His voice uncertain. "It's me." She unlocked the door. He came up the stairs slower than usual, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders hunched. He stood in the doorway, looked around like he was memorizing the space. "Dad and Leanne broke up. He's been weird." Marina poured him a cup of coffee without asking, added the cream and sugar he liked, handed it to him. "Sit." He sat. She sat across from him. "Weird how?" Ethan shrugged. "Like, quiet. He won't talk about it. Just sits on the couch watching TV." Marina sipped her coffee. "You don't have to fix him." Ethan looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "I know." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan said, "Okay, can I ask you something?" Marina nodded. "About the accident. Were you scared?" She considered lying, decided against it. "No, I was tired. And when I heard what you said—" She paused, chose her words carefully. "I realized I'd been tired for a long time." Ethan's face did something complicated. Shame, grief, understanding. His eyes filled and he didn't bother hiding it. "I didn't want you dead." Marina reached across the table, took his hand. "I know. You wanted relief. So did I." He cried then, the kind of crying that's been held back too long, and Marina held his hand and let him. When he was done, she handed him a tissue, refilled his coffee, and asked if he wanted eggs. He said yes. She made them scrambled, the way he liked, and they ate together without talking about Greg or Leanne or the past. Just eggs and coffee and the morning light coming through the big windows. Marina didn't move back, didn't reconcile with Greg, didn't perform the big forgiving mother who sacrificed herself on the altar of family unity. She showed up for Ethan's birthday dinner at a restaurant he chose, split the bill with Greg without comment, and left when it was over. She went to Chloe's spring musical, sat in the back row, clapped when her daughter took her bow. She answered calls when they came, set boundaries when she needed to, and learned to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. On a Tuesday morning in late April, Marina woke early, made coffee in her favorite mug, the Portland one, still too big, still perfect, and carried it to her desk. Sunlight angled through the windows, catching dust motes, turning the loft golden. She opened her planner, flipped to today's date. Chloe's spring musical, opening night. She'd circled it in red 3 weeks ago. She'd go. She'd clap. She wouldn't apologize for arriving alone. On the table beside her planner sat the settlement letter, now framed in simple black wood. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. She touched the glass, traced the number with her fingertip. $4.7 million. Proof that she'd survived. Proof that she'd fought. Proof that she'd stopped disappearing. She picked up her coffee, looked out at the street below, people walking dogs, joggers passing, the world moving forward, and thought, I crashed. I got up. I kept the keys. Marina stood in the wings of the high school auditorium, watching stagehands adjust the set for Chloe's musical. She wasn't supposed to be back here. Parents waited in the lobby or claimed their seats early, but the drama teacher had recognized her from drop-offs years ago and waved her through. "You're Chloe's mom? She's been amazing in rehearsals." Marina nodded, accepted the compliment without deflecting it, and found a spot where she could see without being seen. Chloe stood center stage in a period costume, running lines with another girl, her face animated in a way Marina hadn't witnessed in months. When Chloe laughed at something her scene partner said, the sound carried into the wings, unguarded and real. Marina felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not pride, exactly, but recognition. Her daughter was happy, without her. She slipped out before Chloe could spot her, found her seat in the back row, and texted Greg, "I'm here. sitting back left. You don't need to save me a seat. He didn't respond. 20 minutes later, the lights dimmed. The auditorium filled with the rustling of programs, the hush of anticipation. Greg entered with Leanne, apparently they'd reconciled, and sat 4 rows ahead. Marina watched the back of his head, his arm draped over Leanne's seat, and felt nothing. No bitterness, no victory, just the quiet neutrality of watching a stranger. The curtain rose. Chloe entered stage right, and Marina leaned forward without meaning to. Chloe was good. Not just competent, but genuinely good. Her timing sharp, her voice clear, her presence filling the stage in a way that seemed impossible for someone who'd spent the past year shrinking into herself. During her solo, Marina's throat tightened. She didn't cry. She just listened, really listened, to her daughter sing about wanting more than the life she'd been given, and understood that Chloe wasn't singing about the character. When the song ended, the applause was immediate and loud. Marina clapped until her palms stung. At intermission, she stayed in her seat while everyone else shuffled toward the lobby. She didn't need to make small talk with other parents, didn't need to run into Greg. She just needed to sit in the dark and remember what it felt like to witness her child becoming someone separate from her. After the final curtain call, Marina waited until the crowd thinned before heading backstage. Chloe stood near the dressing room, still in costume, surrounded by classmates and their parents. She saw Marina, and her face did something complicated. Surprise, pleasure, uncertainty. Marina gave her a small wave, mouthed, "You were wonderful," and turned to leave. "Mom, wait." Chloe broke away from the group, hurried over, still wearing stage makeup, her eyes bright. "You came?" Marina smiled. "I told you I would." Chloe glanced back at her friends, then at Marina. "Do you want to come to the cast party? It's just at Mia's house. Her parents are cool." Marina shook her head gently. "This is your night. Go celebrate." Chloe hesitated, then hugged her quickly, fiercely. "Thank you for coming." Marina squeezed back. "Always." She drove home with the windows down, the May air warm and thick with the smell of cut grass and honeysuckle. Her phone buzzed at a red light, Ethan asking if she'd seen the show. She texted back at the next light. She was incredible. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Can we get lunch tomorrow? Just us?" Marina felt that unfamiliar thing again, the recognition. Her son was reaching for her. She wrote, "Noon. That Greek place you like." He sent a thumbs up. The light changed. She drove the rest of the way home with something like hope sitting passenger. The next morning, she woke to an email from her consulting firm. A potential client, a biotech startup navigating early-stage clinical trials, wanted her expertise. The scope of work was reasonable, the timeline flexible, the pay more than fair. She read it twice, then closed her laptop. She'd respond later. First coffee. She stood at the kitchen counter in her pajamas, barefoot on the cool tile, and watched the street below come to life. A woman jogged past with a golden retriever. A teenager skateboarded in lazy circles at the corner. The cafe across the street propped open its doors, the owner arranging chairs on the sidewalk. Marina had been in this loft for 4 months, and she still wasn't used to how much she liked mornings here. The quiet, the light, the sense of starting over every single day. She showered, dressed in jeans and a linen shirt she'd bought impulsively at a boutique in town, the kind of thing she used to think was too young for her. She looked at herself in the mirror and decided she was wrong about a lot of things. At 11:30, she walked to the Greek place, got there early, claimed a table by the window. Ethan arrived 10 minutes late, windblown and apologetic. "Sorry, the bus was..." Marina waved him off. "You're here." He sat, picked up the menu, set it down, picked it up again. Nervous. She waited. "I talked to a counselor at school," he said finally, "about, family stuff." Marina kept her expression neutral. "How's that going?" Ethan shrugged. "Weird. Good weird. She said I should tell you something." He looked out the window, jaw tight. "Dad told us you didn't care about us, that you picked your job over family, and I believed him because it was easier than..." He trailed off. Marina leaned forward slightly. "Easier than what?" Ethan met her eyes. "Easier than admitting I was angry at you for not being who I wanted you to be. Like I wanted you to be the mom who made cupcakes and came to every game, and when you weren't, I just blamed you. But that's not fair." Marina sat back, let his words settle. The server appeared. They ordered without looking at the menu. Gyros for him, Greek salad for her, the same thing they'd ordered here for years. When the server left, Marina said, "You're allowed to have wanted that. I wanted to be that too sometimes." Ethan blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "But I also wanted to do work that mattered. And I couldn't figure out how to be both, so I chose the work and hoped you'd understand someday. I should have explained that. I should have let you be angry without taking it personally." Ethan's eyes filled. "I said I wanted you dead." Marina reached across the table, touched his hand briefly. "You said you wanted to be free. I understand the difference now." The food arrived. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the kind of silence that used to make Marina anxious but now felt earned. Halfway through, Ethan said, "Dad's not doing great. I think he misses you." Marina took a sip of water, chose her words. "Your dad misses the version of me that made him feel like he was enough without trying. I don't blame him for that. But I can't be her anymore." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." They finished eating. Marina paid. As they stood to leave, Ethan said, "Can I come over next weekend? Maybe we could watch a movie or something?" Marina smiled. "I'd like that." That evening, she sat at her desk and responded to the consulting firm's email. She accepted the project, outlined her terms, and hit send. Then she opened a new document and started drafting something she'd been avoiding for weeks. A personal essay about the whistleblower case, the crash, the aftermath. Not for publication, just for herself. She wrote about the moment her keys hit the tile floor. The sound of her children's relief. The way she'd felt both shattered and strangely whole, as if breaking had been necessary to see herself clearly. She wrote for 2 hours, stopped when her eyes started to blur, and saved the document. She'd finish it eventually. Or she wouldn't. Either way, it existed now, outside her head. June arrived with humidity and the kind of heat that made the city shimmer. Marina started running in the mornings before it got unbearable, looping through the neighborhood, past the elementary school Chloe had attended, past the park where she'd push both kids on swings until her arms ached. She ran without music, just her breath and footsteps and the early bird song. She ran until the tightness in her chest loosened, until she remembered that her body had carried her through everything and deserved kindness. One morning she ran past Greg's condo. His car was in the lot. She didn't slow down. Chloe started coming over every Sunday. She never announced it, just showed up around noon with her backpack and stayed until evening, doing homework or scrolling her phone or sometimes just talking. One Sunday she asked, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving?" Marina was washing dishes, Chloe drying. She set down the sponge, considered the question. "I regret not doing it sooner." Chloe paused mid-wipe. "Really?" Marina nodded. "I spent years trying to make everyone else comfortable with my choices. It didn't make anyone happier. It just made me smaller." Chloe set down the dish. "I think I do that too. Try to make everyone comfortable." Marina looked at her daughter, 15, still figuring out who she was separate from everyone's expectations. "You don't have to." In late June, Marina's mother called from Florida. They hadn't spoken since the separation. Her mother had sided with Greg, said Marina was selfish for throwing away a good man. Marina almost didn't answer, then she did. "Hi, Mom." Silence on the other end, then, "Chloe told me about the musical. Said you came?" Marina leaned against the kitchen counter. "I did." Her mother sighed. "She said you've been good." "Different, but good." Marina waited. "I owe you an apology," her mother said quietly. "I didn't understand. I thought you were running away. But Chloe said you ran toward yourself. I think she's right." Marina felt something old and tired release in her chest. "Thank you for saying that." They talked for 20 minutes, careful and tentative, building a bridge neither of them was sure would hold. When they hung up, Marina sat on the couch and let herself cry. Not from sadness, just from the relief of being seen. July brought Ethan's birthday. Marina invited him to dinner at a steakhouse downtown, just the two of them. He ordered the ribeye, grinned when she didn't comment on the price. Over dessert, chocolate cake he insisted on sharing, he said, "I've been thinking about college." Marina set down her fork. "Yeah?" He nodded. "I want to study environmental science, like conservation stuff. Dad thinks I should do business." Marina smiled. "What do you think?" Ethan met her eyes. I think I should do what I want. She raised her water glass. To doing what you want. He clinked his glass against hers, and for the first time in a long time, Marina saw her son as someone who might actually be okay. On a Sunday in early August, Marina woke to find both kids in her apartment. Chloe had let them in with the spare key Marina had given her. Ethan was making pancakes poorly, flour dusting the counter like snow. Chloe sat at the table scrolling her phone. "We brought bagels," she said without looking up, but Ethan wanted to cook. Marina poured herself coffee, leaned against the counter, watched her son flip a pancake that immediately fell apart. "You need more butter in the pan." He added butter. Tried again. This one held. He looked absurdly pleased with himself. They ate together, the three of them, pancakes and bagels and coffee, the morning light pouring through the windows. Nobody mentioned the crash or the settlement or the months of silence. They just ate breakfast like a family that had learned how to be one on new terms. When they finished, Ethan did the dishes without being asked. Chloe dried. Marina watched from the couch, her coffee warm in her hands, and thought about the version of herself who'd driven away from the hospital 4 months ago, alone and unsure. She'd been so tired. She'd thought leaving meant losing everything. She'd been wrong. That night, after the kids left, Marina sat at her desk with the windows open, the city sounds drifting up, car horns, distant music, someone laughing on the street below. She pulled out the settlement letter still in its frame and held it up to the light. $4.7 million. It had never been about the money. It had been about proving she existed beyond other people's perceptions, beyond the roles they'd assigned her. She set the frame back on the table, picked up her coffee mug, the Portland one, chipped now on the rim from being knocked off the counter last week, and turned it in her hands. She'd glued it back together. It held coffee just fine. She opened her laptop, pulled up the essay she'd started in May, and began to write. Not about the crash or the case or the money, about the morning she'd made pancakes with her son, about the night she'd watched her daughter sing, about the moment she'd looked in the mirror and decided she was done apologizing. She wrote until midnight, until her eyes burned and her coffee went cold. Then she saved the document, closed her laptop, and stood at the window. The city glittered below, alive and indifferent. She'd crashed. She'd gotten up. She'd kept the keys. And somewhere along the way, she'd learned to drive herself home. September arrived with the kind of crisp air that made Marina think of fresh starts, even though she'd stopped believing in the myth of clean slates. Beginnings were messier than that. Overlapping, recursive, full of the same problems, wearing new clothes. Still, she liked the feeling of autumn, the way the city smelled like coffee and wood smoke, the way people moved faster as if the cooler weather had given them permission to want things again. She'd signed on for 2 more consulting projects, both short-term, both interesting enough to hold her attention without consuming her. She'd learned to recognize the difference. Ethan started his senior year with a new confidence that surprised her. He'd joined the environmental club, started talking about colleges in Oregon and Washington, places with forests and rain and distance from everything he'd known. Marina listened without offering opinions, just asked questions that helped him think through what he wanted. One afternoon, he called her from school, breathless. "I got into this program. It's like a semester-long internship with the State Parks Department. I'd have to leave school early some days." Marina didn't hesitate. "Do it." She heard his relief through the phone. "Dad said it would hurt my GPA." Marina kept her voice neutral. "Your dad isn't you." Chloe auditioned for the fall play and didn't get cast. She showed up at Marina's apartment that evening, red-eyed and furious, and threw herself on the couch. "I was better than half those people." Marina brought her tea, sat in the chair across from her. "Probably." Chloe looked up, surprised. "You're supposed to say it doesn't matter, or that there'll be other plays or some mom thing." Marina shook her head. "It does matter. You worked hard. You wanted it. And someone else got it. That's allowed to feel terrible." Chloe's face crumpled. Marina moved to the couch, let her daughter cry into her shoulder, and didn't try to fix it. After a while, Chloe pulled back, wiped her eyes. "Thanks for not lying." Marina smoothed Chloe's hair. "I'm done lying. To you, to myself, to anyone." In October, Marina's consulting firm asked if she'd consider a permanent position, Director of Ethics and Compliance, full benefits, the kind of title that would have thrilled her 5 years ago. She asked for the weekend to think about it. That Saturday, she walked to the cafe, ordered her usual, and sat by the window with a notebook. She made 2 lists, Reasons to say yes, reasons to say no. The yes list was practical. Stability, prestige, a clear path forward. The no list was shorter but heavier. Less freedom, more meetings, the risk of disappearing into the work again. She stared at both lists for 20 minutes. Then she flipped to a new page and wrote, "What do I actually want?" The answer came slowly, in fragments. She wanted mornings that belonged to her. She wanted to pick projects that mattered instead of grinding through obligations. She wanted to be available when Chloe needed to cry about a play or when Ethan wanted to talk about tide pools. She wanted to write not just the essay she'd been picking at for months, but other things, messy things, true things. She closed the notebook, finished her coffee, and walked home. On Monday, she declined the offer. Her boss sounded disappointed but unsurprised. "Let me know if you change your mind," he said. Marina thanked him and knew she wouldn't. That same week, Greg called. She almost didn't answer. They communicated mostly through text now, logistical and brief, but something made her pick up. "Marina?" His voice sounded strained. "Can we talk, in person?" She hesitated. "About what?" Silence then. "About everything. Please." She agreed to meet him for coffee, neutral territory, the Starbucks halfway between his condo and her loft. She told herself it was closure. She suspected it was curiosity. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He'd ordered her drink, oat milk latte, 1 pump vanilla, the way she'd always taken it. The gesture felt like an apology or a manipulation. She couldn't tell which. She sat down, took the cup, didn't drink. "What's this about, Greg?" He looked older than she remembered, or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time in years. The lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples, the slump in his shoulders that suggested he was carrying something heavy. "Leanne left, for real this time?" Marina waited. "I'm sorry to hear that." He laughed bitterly. "Are you?" She considered lying, decided against it. "Not really, no." He flinched. "I've been thinking a lot. About us. About what I said to the kids." Marina set down her cup. "What you said was true? I did choose my work. I also chose them every day, in ways you never noticed because you were too busy resenting me for not choosing differently." Greg opened his mouth, closed it. "I was angry," he said finally. "I felt invisible." Marina nodded. "I know. So did I." They sat in silence. A barista called out a name, someone's phone buzzed. The world continued around them. "I told the kids you were selfish," Greg said quietly. "I poisoned them against you because it was easier than admitting I felt inadequate." Marina absorbed this, the closest thing to an apology she'd probably ever get. "Why are you telling me now?" Greg stared into his coffee. "Because Ethan said something last week. He said you taught him that it's okay to want things even if other people are disappointed. And I realized I taught him the opposite, that wanting anything for yourself makes you a bad person." He looked up at her. "You weren't selfish, Marina. You were just yourself, and I couldn't handle it." She felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "Thank you for saying that." He reached across the table like he might take her hand, then thought better of it. "Is there any chance—" She shook her head before he could finish. "No, but I'm glad we talked." She left him there, walked back to her loft in the October sunshine, and felt lighter than she had in months. Not because Greg had apologized, but because she didn't need him to. His validation or lack of it no longer defined her worth. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stood in the space she'd built for herself. The afternoon light made everything golden. She pulled out her laptop and opened the essay she'd been writing. This time she titled it, "The Woman Who Survived Herself." By November, the essay was finished. 4,000 words about the crash, the settlement, the sound of her children's relief, and the choice to rebuild rather than reconcile. She sent it to a literary magazine on a whim, the kind of place that published personal essays by writers she admired. She expected nothing. 3 weeks later, they accepted it. The editor called her personally. "This is extraordinary, raw and honest, and exactly what we need." Marina thanked her, hung up, and sat very still. Someone had read her story and seen her. Not the mother, not the whistleblower, not the ex-wife. Just her. The essay was scheduled to run in the spring issue. Marina told Chloe and Ethan over dinner at her place. Spaghetti carbonara she'd finally mastered after 6 attempts. Chloe looked nervous. Are you going to use our real names? Marina shook her head. You're in it, but anonymized. I'm not interested in exposing you. I'm interested in telling the truth. Ethan twirled pasta on his fork, thinking, what if people judge you? Marina smiled. They will. That's not my problem anymore. Chloe raised her water glass. To not giving a shit what people think. Ethan laughed. Marina clinked her glass against theirs. To that. Christmas came, and with it the annual negotiation of whose house, which traditions, how to split time. Marina opted out entirely. She told the kids she'd be available Christmas Eve if they wanted to come over, but she wasn't doing the big dinner or the forced cheer or the pretense that they were a unit that gathered around a tree. Chloe looked relieved. Ethan asked if he could come sleep over Christmas Eve, just hang out and watch movies. Marina said yes. He showed up at 6 with a duffel bag and a tin of cookies his girlfriend had made. They ate cookies for dinner, watched 2 terrible action movies, and fell asleep on the couch. In the morning, Marina woke to find him still there, sprawled sideways with his mouth open, looking 12 years old. She covered him with a blanket and made coffee as quietly as she could. Chloe came by on Christmas afternoon with a present, a small painting she'd made in her art class, abstract blues and grays that reminded Marina of the piece she'd bought for her loft. I noticed you liked that one, Chloe said, almost shy, so I tried to make something similar. Marina hung it next to the original, stepped back to look at both. It's perfect. They ordered Chinese food, ate it straight from the containers, and talked about Chloe's plan to audition for the spring musical again. I'm going to get cast this time, Chloe said matter of fact. Marina believed her. In January, a reporter reached out about the whistleblower case. Someone had leaked documents related to the pharmaceutical trial, and suddenly the story was news again. The reporter wanted an interview, wanted Marina's perspective, wanted to put her on camera. Marina declined. She'd already told her story in the essay. She didn't need to perform her trauma for public consumption. The reporter pushed, "Don't you want people to know what you went through?" And Marina said, "I want people to read my essay. That's enough." She hung up and blocked the number. The essay published in March. Marina's mother called the day it went live online, crying. "I had no idea," she kept saying. "I had no idea it was that bad." Marina didn't correct her. It hadn't been bad, it had been necessary. But she let her mother cry and apologize and promised to do better. They talked for an hour, the longest conversation they'd had in years. When they hung up, Marina felt something like peace. Not resolution, not repair, just the acknowledgement that they were both trying. The essay went viral in that quiet literary way, shared in book clubs, discussed in therapy sessions, forwarded between friends with subject lines like "You need to read this?" Marina's inbox filled with messages from strangers, women mostly, thanking her for putting words to something they'd felt but couldn't name. She read every message, responded to none. She'd said what she needed to say. The rest was theirs to hold. In April, Ethan got accepted to 3 colleges, all in the Pacific Northwest, all far from home. He came to Marina's apartment to tell her, nervous and excited. "I think I'm going to go," he said. "Like really go, even though Dad wants me closer." Marina pulled him into a hug. "Good. Go. Build a life that's yours." When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I'm sorry I wasted so much time being angry at you." Marina shook her head. "You weren't wasting time. You were figuring out who you are. That's what you're supposed to do." He smiled, wobbly but real. "Will you come visit?" She didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." Chloe got cast in the spring musical just like she'd said she would. Marina went to all 3 performances, sat in the back row each time, and clapped until her hands hurt. On closing night, Chloe found her in the parking lot afterward. Dad didn't come to any of them. Marina leaned against her car. "I know." Chloe's face twisted. "Why do I still care?" Marina pulled her close. "Because he's your father. You're allowed to want him to show up. That doesn't make you weak." Chloe cried into her shoulder and Marina held her, and they stood there in the parking lot under the streetlights until Chloe was ready to let go. In May, Marina sold the house. Greg fought her on it initially. "The kids grew up there," he said, as if nostalgia were a reason to hold on to something that no longer served anyone. She offered him first right of refusal. He declined. The house sold in 3 days. Marina took her half of the proceeds, put some in savings, donated some to a nonprofit that supported whistleblowers, and kept the rest liquid. She didn't need it, but she liked knowing it was there. Proof that she'd built something that outlasted the marriage, the job, the version of herself she'd shed like old skin. On the first Saturday in June, she woke early and walked to the cafe. The owner recognized her now, had her drink ready before she ordered. She took it to her usual table by the window and pulled out her notebook. She'd started a new essay, this one about repair, not the kind where you glue broken things back together, but the kind where you let the cracks show and call it art. She wrote for 2 hours until her coffee went cold and her hand cramped. When she looked up, the cafe was full, the morning rush in full swing. She closed her notebook, stretched, and walked home through streets that finally felt like hers.